The summer sun beat down mercilessly on the grounds of Kensington Palace, turning the usually pristine courtyard into a furnace of heat and humidity. Guard Thomas Mitchell stood at his post near the main entrance, sweat already beginning to form beneath his heavy ceremonial uniform despite the early morning hour. The red wool tunic, designed for British weather's typical coolness, felt like a prison of fabric in the unseasonable heat wave that had gripped London for the past week. Thomas had been serving as a palace guard for 3 years, having worked his way up from a junior position after his military service. At 28, he was one of the younger guards, but his dedication and unwavering commitment to duty had earned him respect among his colleagues and superiors. Today, however, would test every ounce of his training and determination. The weather forecast had predicted temperatures reaching 34 degrees Celsius, unusual for London, and particularly challenging for the guards who were required to maintain their positions regardless of conditions. Thomas checked his watch, 8:30 a.m. His shift would last until 4:30 p.m., 8 full hours of standing at attention in what meteorologists were calling one of the hottest days of the year. As the morning progressed, Thomas could feel the heat beginning to take its toll. The heavy black boots, polished to mirror perfection, seemed to absorb and trap every ray of sunshine. His tall bearskin hat, a symbol of British tradition and military pride, felt increasingly heavy on his head. Yet he remained motionless, his rifle held precisely at the regulation angle, his eyes focused straight ahead as protocol demanded. Tourists began arriving in larger numbers as the day wore on, many of them seeking shade under the few trees scattered around the palace grounds. Thomas watched from his peripheral vision as families with children, elderly couples, and young visitors from around the world gathered to catch a glimpse of royal life. Some paused to take photographs with the guards, always maintaining the respectful distance that barriers and etiquette required. By mid-morning, the heat had become almost unbearable. Thomas's uniform was soaked with perspiration, and he could feel beads of sweat rolling down his face beneath the chin strap of his ceremonial headgear. His throat felt dry and scratchy, but guards were not permitted to drink water while on duty at their posts. The rules were clear and non-negotiable. Maintaining the dignity and tradition of the Royal Guard took precedence over personal comfort. Other guards at nearby positions were facing similar challenges. Thomas could see his colleague James at the adjacent post, his face flushed red from the heat, though like Thomas he maintained perfect posture and composure. The training they had received emphasized that guards must never show weakness or discomfort while representing the crown. Fainting, moving from position, or any display of distress was considered a serious breach of duty. The palace staff and security personnel were well aware of the extreme conditions. Several times throughout the morning, supervisors had discreetly checked on the guards, though they could offer little relief without breaking established protocols. The rotating schedule that normally provided regular breaks had been adjusted slightly, but the core requirement remained. Guards must maintain their posts for the full duration of their assigned shifts. As noon approached, Thomas felt his vision beginning to blur slightly around the edges. The combination of intense heat, heavy uniform, and prolonged standing was pushing his physical endurance to its limits. He focused on his breathing, using techniques learned during military training to maintain consciousness and stability. The ground beneath his feet radiated heat like a giant warming stone, making even the soles of his feet uncomfortably hot despite the thick leather boots. Tourists continued to gather, many of them commenting on the dedication of the guards who stood motionless, despite the obvious discomfort the weather must be causing them. Some visitors expressed concern, asking security personnel if the guards would be given relief from the heat. The responses were always the same. The guards were highly trained professionals who took pride in their duty, regardless of weather conditions. Thomas had always taken pride in his role as a palace guard. Growing up in a military family, he understood the importance of duty, honor, and service. His father had served in the Royal Navy, and his grandfather had been a soldier during World War II. The tradition of service ran deep in his family, and he had never once considered his role as merely a job. It was a calling, a responsibility that he carried with deep respect and commitment. However, as the sun reached its peak intensity, Thomas began to worry about his ability to complete his shift safely. He had witnessed other guards succumb to heat exhaustion in previous summers, though never under conditions quite this extreme. The medical staff at the palace were always on standby for such situations, but fainting while on duty would be a source of embarrassment and could potentially impact his career prospects within the guard. The afternoon sun showed no mercy as Thomas entered his 5th hour on duty. The heat seemed to rise from the pavement in visible waves, distorting the air around him like a desert mirage. His lips had become cracked and dry, and he could taste salt from the constant stream of perspiration that trickled down his face. Despite the discomfort, his training kept him upright and alert, though every muscle in his body screamed for relief. Around him, the palace grounds had taken on an almost surreal quality. The usually vibrant green lawns appeared wilted and brown in patches, and even the robust palace staff seemed to move more slowly in the oppressive heat. Garden sprinklers had been activated to protect the precious royal flower beds, creating small oases of cooler air that Thomas could only dream of experiencing. At 1:15 p.m., something unusual began to happen. Thomas noticed increased activity near the main palace building, with several staff members moving with more urgency than typical for a routine day. Security personnel were speaking into their communication devices more frequently, and there seemed to be some sort of preparation taking place. Though his position required him to maintain his forward gaze, his peripheral vision caught glimpses of what appeared to be arrangements being made for someone important. The crowd of tourists had grown throughout the day, many seeking whatever shade they could find while still hoping to catch sight of any royal family members. Parents carried water bottles and used handheld fans to keep their children cool, while elderly visitors sought refuge under umbrellas and in the limited shaded areas. The contrast between the tourists' ability to seek relief and Thomas's rigid requirement to remain at his post was stark and increasingly difficult to ignore. Thomas's immediate supervisor, Sergeant Williams, had walked past his position 3 times in the last hour, each time giving him a subtle nod of acknowledgement. The sergeant's expression showed concern, but also confidence in Thomas's ability to maintain his duties. This silent communication was part of the unspoken understanding between guards. They looked out for each other while maintaining the highest standards of professional conduct. By 2 p.m., Thomas was experiencing the early stages of heat exhaustion. His skin felt clammy despite the intense heat, and occasionally he felt slightly dizzy. The heavy wool uniform had become completely saturated with sweat, making it feel even heavier than usual. His hands, though hidden within regulation gloves, were slippery with perspiration as he maintained his grip on his rifle. The palace's medical team had positioned themselves strategically around the grounds, though they remained discreet to avoid drawing attention to the guards' distress. Dr. Sarah Chen, the on-duty physician, had been monitoring the situation closely and was prepared to intervene if any guard showed signs of serious heat-related illness. However, she also understood the importance of maintaining royal protocols and would only act if absolutely necessary. During this critical period, Thomas began to draw on reserves of strength he didn't know he possessed. He thought about his training, his family's military tradition, and the honor of serving the royal family. These thoughts became a mental anchor, helping him push through the physical discomfort and maintain his position. He reminded himself that countless guards before him had faced similar challenges and had persevered with dignity and grace. The tourists continued to show remarkable appreciation for the guards' dedication. Many commented to their companions about the incredible discipline and commitment required to stand motionless in such extreme conditions. Some visitors even began to organize themselves to provide what little shade they could, by standing between the guards and the sun, though they maintained appropriate distances and showed proper respect for the formal protocols. As the clock approached 2:30 p.m., Thomas noticed a commotion near the palace's main entrance. Several security officers were positioning themselves along a pathway, and palace staff were making final adjustments to the area. The increased activity suggested that a member of the royal family might be making an appearance, though such events were rarely announced in advance to maintain security and prevent overwhelming crowds. Thomas's heart rate increased slightly, not from the heat this time, but from the possibility of being on duty during a royal appearance. Despite his physical discomfort, he felt a surge of professional pride. These were the moments that made all the training, discipline, and sacrifice worthwhile. the opportunity to serve and protect the royal family in person rather than simply maintaining a ceremonial presence. The crowd of tourists began to sense something was happening. Cameras were readied, children were lifted onto parents' shoulders, and a buzz of excitement rippled through the gathering. The heat, while still oppressive, seemed momentarily forgotten as anticipation built for what might be an unexpected royal sighting. Thomas checked his posture one final time, ensuring that despite nearly 6 hours in the blazing heat, he still presented the perfect image of a British royal guard. His uniform might be soaked with perspiration, his body might be crying out for relief, but his commitment to duty remained absolutely unwavering. Whatever was about to happen, he would face it with the same dignity and professionalism he had maintained throughout this grueling day. At exactly 2:45 p.m., the palace doors opened and Thomas's peripheral vision caught sight of familiar figures emerging into the blazing afternoon sun. Prince William appeared first, followed by Catherine, the Princess of Wales, and their 3 children. 8-year-old Princess Charlotte walked between her parents, while Prince George, now 10, and 4-year-old Prince Louis flanked the group. They appeared to be heading toward the garden area, likely for a planned outdoor activity despite the extreme heat. The crowd of tourists erupted in excited whispers and the gentle clicking of camera phones, though everyone maintained the respectful distance that security barriers and royal protocol required. Thomas felt his pulse quicken, not from heat exhaustion this time, but from the profound honor of being on duty during a rare public appearance by the entire Cambridge family on the palace grounds. Princess Charlotte, dressed in a light blue summer dress and matching sun hat, seemed particularly observant as the family moved across the courtyard. Unlike her brothers, who were focused on their destination, she appeared to be taking in her surroundings with curious eyes. Her gaze moved from the tourists to the palace staff, and then to the guards standing at their posts around the perimeter. Thomas maintained his rigid posture and forward gaze as protocol demanded, but he was acutely aware of the royal family's presence just meters away from his position. The irony was not lost on him. Here he was, experiencing one of the most significant moments of his career as a palace guard, while simultaneously enduring one of the most physically challenging days he had ever faced in the role. The Princess of Wales appeared to be speaking quietly with palace staff about the heat, gesturing toward the guards' positions with what seemed like concern. Even from his fixed position, Thomas could sense the family's awareness of the extreme conditions and the toll it was taking on everyone working outdoors. The royal family had always been known for their consideration of palace staff and security personnel, often inquiring about their welfare during challenging circumstances. As the family continued their movement across the grounds, Princess Charlotte's attention seemed increasingly drawn to the guards. She tugged gently on her mother's hand and pointed in Thomas's direction, though he could not hear what was being said. The Princess of Wales bent down to listen to her daughter, nodding thoughtfully at whatever observation Charlotte was making. Meanwhile, Thomas was fighting an internal battle against the relentless heat. His vision had begun to blur more frequently, and he could feel his legs becoming unsteady beneath him. The combination of dehydration, heat exhaustion, and the heavy uniform was pushing his body beyond its normal limits. Yet the presence of the royal family gave him an additional surge of determination. He absolutely could not allow himself to falter while they were present. The palace medical team had positioned themselves even more strategically once the royal family appeared, understanding that any incident involving the guards would need to be handled with exceptional discretion and speed. Dr. Chen watched Thomas carefully, noting the signs of distress, while also respecting the need to maintain the dignity of the moment. Prince William and Catherine appeared to be discussing something with their security detail, while the children explored the garden area under careful supervision. The heat was affecting everyone, and palace staff were providing water and shade wherever possible for the family and their entourage. The contrast between the family's ability to seek relief and the guards' requirement to maintain their posts was becoming increasingly apparent. Princess Charlotte continued to show interest in the guards, asking her parents questions and pointing toward different positions around the courtyard. Her natural curiosity about the people who worked to protect her family was evident, and her parents patiently answered her questions while keeping the family's activities moving forward. Thomas felt a moment of dizziness wash over him around 3:10 p.m. More intense than any he had experienced earlier, his grip on his rifle momentarily loosened, and he had to concentrate intently to maintain his balance. The ground seemed to shift slightly beneath his feet, and for a terrifying moment, he thought he might actually collapse while the royal family was present. Drawing on every ounce of his military training and personal determination, Thomas managed to steady himself and regain his composure. He focused on his breathing, using techniques learned during his service to maintain consciousness and stability. The thought of embarrassing himself, or the royal guard in front of the family he was sworn to protect, was absolutely unacceptable. The tourists had become increasingly concerned about the guards as the afternoon wore on, with many commenting audibly about the extreme conditions and the impressive dedication being displayed. Some visitors began to openly express concern about whether the guards were receiving adequate care in the dangerous heat, though they maintained their respectful distance and proper behavior throughout their observations. As 3:20 p.m. approached, Thomas realized he was entering the most critical phase of his ordeal. His body was clearly approaching its limits, but the royal family's presence meant that maintaining his position was more important than ever. He could see other guards around the perimeter facing similar challenges, each one fighting their own private battle against the elements while maintaining the perfect appearance of ceremonial dignity and professional competence. At 3:25 p.m., something remarkable happened that would change Thomas's entire perspective on his service and the royal family he protected. Princess Charlotte had been walking with her family through the garden area when she suddenly stopped and tugged insistently on her mother's dress. Catherine bent down to hear what her daughter was saying, and Thomas could see the young princess pointing directly toward his position with an expression of genuine concern on her face. The conversation between mother and daughter lasted several moments, with Princess Charlotte gesticulating toward Thomas and the other guards, her voice becoming more animated though still inaudible from his distance. Catherine listened carefully to her daughter's observations, nodding seriously and occasionally glancing toward the guard positions herself. Prince William joined the conversation, kneeling down to Charlotte's eye level to better understand her concerns. What Thomas didn't know was that Princess Charlotte had been watching the guards carefully throughout their visit and had noticed signs of distress that even some adults had missed. With the keen observation skills that children often possess, she had seen the slight wavering in Thomas's stance, the way his hands trembled almost imperceptibly on his rifle, and the obvious signs of heat exhaustion that were becoming impossible to completely conceal. After a brief family discussion, Catherine took Charlotte's hand and began walking directly toward Thomas's position. This was highly unusual. While royal family members occasionally acknowledged guards with a nod or brief word, extended personal interaction was rare and typically occurred only during formal ceremonies or specific circumstances. The crowd of tourists noticed this deviation from normal protocol and watched with increased interest. As they approached, Thomas maintained his regulation posture and forward gaze, though his heart was racing from both heat exhaustion and the unprecedented nature of what was happening. He could see Princess Charlotte's concerned expression in his peripheral vision, and Catherine's equally concerned but gentle demeanor as they drew near to his post. Catherine stopped just outside the formal boundary that separated guards from visitors and spoke quietly to Charlotte, who nodded earnestly in response. The princess then looked up at Thomas with bright, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through his stoic exterior to the human being struggling beneath the ceremonial uniform. "Mummy," Charlotte said in her clear, confident voice that carried just far enough for Thomas to hear. "The guard looks very hot and tired. Can we help him?" Her innocent question, spoken with genuine compassion, revealed the depth of her observation and concern for others, qualities that were already evident in her young character. Catherine smiled gently at her daughter's empathy before addressing Thomas directly, though she maintained appropriate protocol by not expecting a verbal response. "We've noticed how challenging the conditions are today," she said quietly, her voice filled with genuine appreciation and concern. "Your dedication is remarkable, and we want you to know that your service is deeply valued and appreciated." Princess Charlotte then did something that would be remembered by Thomas for the rest of his life. She reached into the small bag she was carrying and pulled out a bottle of cold water that had been given to her by palace staff. Without prompting from her parents and with the natural generosity that children often display, she placed the bottle carefully on the ground just within Thomas's reach positioning it so he could access it if needed while maintaining his post. "For when you can drink it," she said simply, her 8-year-old voice filled with kindness and understanding that seemed far beyond her years. "You must be very thirsty." The gesture was spontaneous, heartfelt, and completely unprecedented in Thomas's experience as a palace guard. The crowd of tourists who witnessed this exchange fell completely silent, many of them visibly moved by the young princess's compassion and awareness. Several visitors were seen wiping away tears, touched by this display of humanity and kindness from a member of the royal family towards someone who served to protect them. Catherine placed a gentle hand on Charlotte's shoulder, clearly proud of her daughter's empathetic response to the situation. Prince William, who had been watching from a short distance, approached and nodded respectfully toward Thomas, a gesture of acknowledgement between one person who had served his country and another who continued to do so. "Thank you for your service, especially under these conditions," William said quietly, his voice carrying the authority of his position, but also the warmth of genuine human appreciation. "Your professionalism and dedication reflect the very best of the Royal Guard, and we are honored to have you protecting our family." The medical team, who had been monitoring the situation closely, saw this as an appropriate moment to discreetly approach and assess Thomas's condition. Dr. Chen moved carefully toward his position, understanding that the royal family's presence and acknowledgement had created a unique opportunity to provide assistance while maintaining the dignity of all involved. "Princess." Charlotte looked up at her parents with satisfaction, clearly pleased that she had been able to help someone who was struggling. Her natural instinct to show kindness to others, regardless of their position or role, demonstrated the values that Catherine and William were instilling in their children: compassion, awareness of others' needs, and the understanding that service and leadership involve caring for those around you. Thomas felt overwhelming gratitude not just for the water, which represented potential relief from his physical distress, but for the recognition and kindness shown by the family he served. In that moment, despite his physical discomfort and exhaustion, he felt a renewed sense of purpose and pride in his role as a palace guard. The moments following Princess Charlotte's gesture created a ripple effect throughout the palace grounds that no one could have anticipated. Dr. Chen, now able to approach Thomas's position with implicit royal approval, conducted a quick but thorough assessment of his condition. She spoke quietly with Catherine about the severity of the heat-related stress affecting all the guards, leading to an immediate and compassionate response from the royal family. Within minutes, Prince William was speaking directly with the palace security chief and senior guard officials. The conversation was brief but decisive, resulting in an unprecedented order that reflected both practical concern for the guards' welfare and the royal family's genuine care for those who served them. Emergency cooling stations were immediately established at strategic points around the palace perimeter, allowing guards to receive relief without abandoning their posts entirely. Princess Charlotte watched these developments with fascination, understanding that her simple act of kindness had sparked something much larger. She asked her mother numerous questions about the guards' duties, their uniforms, and why they had to stand so still for such long periods. Catherine patiently explained the traditions and importance of the Royal Guard, while also acknowledging that sometimes traditions needed to be adapted to ensure everyone's safety and well-being. Thomas, still maintaining his position but now with the promise of imminent relief, felt a profound shift in his understanding of his role and the people he served. The water bottle at his feet had become more than just a source of hydration. It represented recognition, compassion, and the human connection that existed between the royal family and their protectors, even within the formal constraints of protocol and tradition. The crowd of tourists who had witnessed Princess Charlotte's act of kindness began sharing the story with others, and soon the entire gathering was buzzing with admiration and respect. Many visitors commented that this moment exemplified everything they admired about the British royal family: their combination of dignity, tradition, and genuine humanity. Several tourists were overheard saying they would remember this day not just for seeing the royal family, but for witnessing such a beautiful display of compassion. Palace staff moved efficiently to implement the emergency measures, bringing portable shade structures and cooling equipment to each guard position. The medical team established monitoring stations to track the guards' conditions more closely, ensuring that no one would be pushed beyond safe physical limits. These changes, while temporary for the day's extreme conditions, would later influence permanent adjustments to guard protocols during extreme weather events. At 3:45 p.m., Sergeant Williams approached Thomas's position with relief arrangements that would allow him to step away briefly for hydration and cooling, while maintaining full security coverage. The sergeant's expression showed both concern for his subordinates' welfare and pride in Thomas's extraordinary endurance and professionalism throughout the ordeal. "Mitchell," the sergeant said quietly, "you've shown remarkable dedication today. Her Royal Highness Princess Charlotte specifically requested that we ensure you receive immediate care and recognition for your service under these extreme conditions. You're to take 15 minutes for recovery, and that's a direct order influenced by royal concern for your welfare." Thomas felt overwhelmed by the unprecedented nature of the day's events. As he carefully moved from his position for the first time in over 7 hours, his legs shook from exhaustion and relief. The water bottle that Princess Charlotte had placed for him was carefully retrieved and would later become a treasured memento of this extraordinary day in his service to the crown. The cooling station that had been rapidly established nearby provided immediate relief from the oppressive heat. Thomas sat in blessed shade for the first time since early morning, drinking cool water and allowing his body temperature to gradually normalize. The contrast was so dramatic that he felt almost dizzy from the relief, his body finally able to begin recovering from the extreme stress it had endured. Dr. Chen conducted a thorough medical evaluation, checking Thomas's vital signs and hydration levels. While he had pushed his physical limits to the extreme, his excellent fitness and determination had prevented serious heat-related injury. She recommended extended rest and continued hydration, noting that his dedication and endurance had been remarkable, but that such extreme conditions required immediate attention to prevent long-term health effects. Meanwhile, Princess Charlotte continued to show interest in the guards' welfare, asking her parents if all the guards were receiving help and expressing satisfaction when she was assured that measures were being taken to care for everyone. Her natural empathy and awareness had not only helped Thomas specifically, but had catalyzed improvements in care for all the palace guards facing the dangerous heat. The royal family's visit continued, but with obvious modifications to account for the extreme weather. They moved more frequently between shaded areas, took regular breaks, and ensured that all staff and security personnel had access to cooling resources. Princess Charlotte's initial observation and compassionate response had influenced not just immediate care for the guards, but had demonstrated the importance of adapting traditions and protocols to prioritize human welfare when circumstances demanded it. As Thomas rested in the cooling station, he reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had begun with a young princess's keen observation and kind heart. Her simple act of placing a water bottle within his reach had sparked a series of responses that exemplified the very best aspects of both royal service and royal leadership. The recognition that true nobility lies in caring for others, regardless of rank or position. The aftermath of that extraordinary day would have lasting impacts that extended far beyond Thomas's individual experience, or even the immediate changes to guard protocols during extreme weather. Within a week, the palace administration had implemented new policies for guard welfare during dangerous weather conditions, directly influenced by Princess Charlotte's compassionate observation and the royal family's response to the situation. Thomas returned to his duties with renewed vigor and a completely transformed perspective on his role as a palace guard. The experience had shown him that his service was not just appreciated in abstract terms, but was genuinely valued by the people he protected. The memory of Princess Charlotte's kindness became a source of strength during challenging moments, reminding him that his dedication was seen and recognized at the highest levels. The story of Princess Charlotte's gesture spread throughout the royal guard and palace staff, becoming a powerful example of the human connections that existed within the formal structure of royal service. Senior officers used the incident as a teaching moment, illustrating how true leadership involves caring for those who serve, and how even the youngest members of the royal family understood the importance of compassion and awareness. Princess Charlotte herself continued to show interest in the palace staff and guards during subsequent visits and events. She would often ask about the guards' welfare and remembered individual faces, including Thomas's. Her parents encouraged this empathy and awareness, understanding that these qualities would serve her well in her future role and responsibilities as a member of the royal family. The tourists who witnessed the event shared their stories widely, many posting on social media about the remarkable compassion they had observed. The incident became a positive story about the royal family that highlighted their human side and genuine care for others. Travel blogs and royal watchers shared the story as an example of the values being instilled in the younger generation of royals. 3 months later, during a formal ceremony recognizing exceptional service, Thomas was specifically commended for his dedication during the extreme weather conditions. Princess Charlotte, now 9 years old, was present at the ceremony and personally congratulated him, remembering their previous encounter and asking about his well-being with genuine interest and concern. The water bottle that Princess Charlotte had placed for Thomas was later displayed in a small personal collection he maintained of meaningful items from his service. It served as a daily reminder not just of that challenging day, but of the compassion and awareness that had made the royal family worth serving with such dedication, and Pride Palace medical protocols were permanently updated to include more robust monitoring and intervention procedures during extreme weather events. The changes ensured that no guard would again face such dangerous conditions without appropriate support and medical oversight. Dr. Chen was commended for her role in advocating for the guards' welfare and helping to implement the new safety measures. Thomas's fellow guards often spoke about that day as a turning point in their understanding of their relationship with the royal family. The incident demonstrated that their service was valued not just for its ceremonial importance, but for the personal sacrifice and dedication it required. This recognition strengthened morale throughout the guard and reinforced their commitment to excellence in their duties. The story became part of palace lore, shared among staff members as an example of Princess Charlotte's developing character and the values that the royal family embodied. It illustrated how leadership could be demonstrated through compassion, awareness, and willingness to act on behalf of others, even when those others held different positions in the social hierarchy. Years later, as Princess Charlotte grew older and took on more royal responsibilities, she would often reference that day as formative in her understanding of service and leadership. The experience had taught her that true nobility came not from position or title, but from recognizing the humanity and worth of every person, regardless of their role or circumstances. Thomas continued his service as a palace guard with distinction, eventually becoming a trainer for new recruits. He would share the story of Princess Charlotte's kindness as an example of why their service mattered and how even the smallest gestures of recognition could have profound impacts on those who dedicated their lives to protecting others. The legacy of that blistering hot day lived on in improved policies, stronger relationships between the royal family and their protectors, and a young princess's growing understanding of compassion and leadership. What had begun as a test of physical endurance had become a testament to human kindness, royal character, and the enduring bonds between those who serve and those they are honored to protect. The bottle of water, a simple gesture from an 8-year-old princess, had become a symbol of empathy, recognition, and the understanding that true greatness lies in caring for others, especially during their moments of greatest need.